Hi there, my name is Diego Alfonso, and I'm one of the hosts for the Florida Aviation Network, broadcasting live and in the clear from our studios in Oviedo, Florida. Today, just like we promised in December, we are broadcasting the first Plane Time show of 2024. And to tell you the truth, between you, me, and the lamppost, I feel like I'm usurping the throne of Ben Coleman, who is the original and regular host of the program. So Ben, I'm going to make you look good. All right, today, just like we promised, we have back again Dr. George Bartuska. And I want to make sure that I'm going to read correctly his background, which is kind of lengthy, but I want to make sure that everybody understands his background, where he comes from, and how he got here. So listen just a little bit, and this will be quick. So he was born and raised in South Bend, Indiana, cold territory. He was a weather hobbyist. Actually, as a kid, he built weather instruments and weather stations, sample weather stations. So you can tell that he was attracted to weather from a very early age. He survived the 1965 Palm Sunday tornado outbreak in northern Indiana, and you probably remember that if you are about that age. He's a product of naval aviation, actually aircraft mechanic and weather student at the time. Learned to fly at the Memphis Navy Flight Club in Millington, Tennessee. Worked on Grumman S-2F trackers and Lockheed, the S-3A Viking, which were anti-submarine aircraft back in the day, trying to look for Russian submarines. Survived collision on aircraft carrier USS John F. Kennedy with a cruiser USS Belknap. He attended Purdue University, engineering and economics, and with a minor on human factors psychology. Became a test equipment design engineer, then aerospace test engineer. Bendix in South Bend, and second with Martin Marietta, Lucky Martin here in Orlando, Florida. In the fall of the USSR, and of course, he was with the military industry and civil engineering, work and business development. Then he survived the economy crash of 2008. He retired from engineering and became a licensed teacher. Taught airspace technology, engineering technology, and earthspace science. He retired teaching in 2020, that's when the COVID hit, and finished his doctorate in 2021 on emergency management. And he teaches meteorology for the U.S. Coast Guard, Civil Air Patrol, and the Florida Aviation Network. Dr. Bartuska, welcome to the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I tell you what, I was looking forward to today because you kind of gave us a sample of this back in December. So I understand that we're going to do two parts, by the way. The first part, it will be about structural icing. And the second part will involve systemizing, which are two different things. And right. Sometimes pilots may be confused a little bit about those. And I'm pretty sure that by the time you get done today, it will be like a crystal ball.
There we go. So let's review. Last time we talked about winter flying, introducing all the aspects of flying during the winter time like it is up north right now. Next time, we're going to talk about ice protection systems. We're going to talk about boot system, de-icing boot systems, anti-icing systems. So today, we're going to really hone in on icing. So my first slide, introduction here. We're going to do what should be done in 1 day in 30 minutes. That's just our limited time. And let me start out by saying icing is a very complex subject. It involves aeronautics and then it involves physics, and we're going to get to the point where we can understand it. Now, weather Meteorology is considered the most difficult and least understood subject in aviation training curriculum. It's not, there just isn't time usually to cover it. Most pilots spend the rest of their life trying to learn all there is to learn about meteorology. Our theme for today, and anytime we talk about icing, as developed by NASA and the FAA and the AOPA, is that there's no such thing as a little ice. Now, although we tend to think of icing as a winter phenomena, icing can occur anywhere, anytime, in any climate, during any season, during any flight. In moist atmospheric conditions like we have right here in Florida, with the air temperature as high as 90 degrees Fahrenheit outside air temperature, and we'll be talking about that in the second presentation. Icing encounters can be dangerous. Every icing encounter is unique and unpredictable. Different aircraft may react differently to the same icing condition, which is why you got to be real careful when you're getting a PIREP. If you're flying a Cessna 182 and that PIREP is coming from a 737, a Boeing 737, you've got to interpret that light icing for him could be heavy icing for you. Icing-caused accidents usually involved experienced pilots. Okay, now separating general aviation from the airlines have a whole infrastructure to handle icing situations. And we're going to talk about that more in the next time we get together. But their thing is to minimize the amount of time the aircraft spends on the ground after being de-iced and then going into the anti-ice mode, because they're there to make money, to get us from point A to point B. But you, the pilot, have complete responsibility for the go or no-go decision to fly based on your training and the best information available. We've got to talk about FAR 121.629. No person may take off an aircraft when frost, ice, or snow is adhering to the wings, control surfaces, propellers, engine inlets, or other critical surfaces of the aircraft. The overall concept is what's known as the clean air concept, and Boeing has an excellent PDF document online. Airplane takeoff performance is based on having clean surfaces. If not aerodynamically clean, the result will be reduced lift, increased drag, increased stall speed, potential severe roll problems, and possible abnormal pitch problems, and we're going to talk about this more later. Here's the 4 forces of flight that everyone learns when they start to learn how to fly. Lift generated by the wings, thrust generated by the engine and power plant, and the fact that we're going through a viscous fluid that we call air, there's drag, and of course the weight. What does icing do? Icing on the wings is going to decrease lift, it's going to create more weight, it can reduce the output of the engine and the propeller, and all of that's going to increase drag going through this viscous fluid. A small buildup of ice on the wing can reduce lift by 30%, increase stall speed by 15%, and increase the drag by 200% or more. There's no such thing as a little ice. Now, in all the instructions on aviation icing, they're going to talk about clear ice and rime ice. What is clear ice? Clear ice is the good old ice we all know. Happens during ice storms, when you freeze ice to make ice cubes, or up north in the winter. As Diego mentioned, I grew up in Indiana. We'd have icicles hanging off the eaves of the house. That's clear ice. The other type is rime ice. Sounds like a weird thing, but it's just the frosty ice that you've seen in your freezer or in the freezer in your refrigerator. Now, here's something we really want to hit. We all grew up hearing that water freezes at 0 degrees centigrade and 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And you know what? It just ain't so all the time. Supercooled water. Supercooling, also known as undercooling, is the process of lowering the temperature of a liquid or a gas below its freezing point without it becoming a solid. In water at the freezing temperature, ice crystals usually form around a dust particle in the water. Think about condensation nuclei when we're forming just raindrops from water vapor. So there's got to be something for that freezing, that crystalline structure to start forming on. Without dust particles, the temperature can get even lower before the water turns to ice. In the laboratory, for example, researchers have shown that it's possible to cool water down to minus 40 degrees Celsius without producing a single ice cube. This super cooled water in a cloud is just waiting for something to freeze on, like your aircraft. And by the way, remember that minus 40 C is the same as minus 40 Fahrenheit. Now, ice can form on the aircraft wing leading edge surfaces at altitudes where freezing starts and above, because the higher we go, generally the colder it gets, less there's an inversion. Water droplets in the air can be super cool, that's what we're talking about, to below freezing temperatures without actually turning into ice unless they're disturbed in some manner. These are referred to as the supercooled droplets, or SLDs. However, the aircraft surfaces disturbed these droplets and they immediately turn to ice on aircraft structures. Ice may be glazed, clear, what we call glazed or clear ice, or rime, rough ice. And as we see in the picture in the lower left, generally in cumulus type clouds, we're going to get clear icing, which can be real dangerous because, as we're going to show you, it can actually form horns on the leading edge of the wing. Rime ice is more often encountered in stratus clouds, and mixed icing and or wet snow can be encountered in all kinds of different environments. Here's an example, a good example showing clear ice. There's the horns that you see sticking out above and below the leading edge. The next one is rime ice, looks like the inside of your freezer, and then we have a mixture of rime and clear ice. Once again, there's no such thing as a little ice. Now, icing normally requires two conditions. You've visible moisture, clouds, fog, precipitation, and low temperatures capable of changing moisture to ice, about 2 degrees Celsius to minus 20 degrees Celsius, or 36 Fahrenheit to minus 4 Fahrenheit. Icing conditions normally do not exist outside of the clouds. And there's no freezing precipitation or temperatures outside of the freezing zone. Here's an excellent diagram out of the National Weather Service Comet program. Notice the very bottom there. I mean, this wouldn't be today in North Dakota where it's minus 40, but in a typical flying application, notice the bottom there where it says no icing. There's liquid moisture in the air, but it's not cold enough to freeze. And above, where it gets too cold, there isn't enough liquid ice to turn into ice to adhere to your aircraft. But that second level up, between 0 degrees centigrade and 15 degrees centigrade, we're going to have supercooled liquid moisture in the clouds that is a significant icing threat for clear, and then rime ice above it with mixed phase between minus 15 and minus 14 centigrade. Now, another thing that is in this whole topic is freezing rain. It's a little different. Avoid it. For general aviation aircraft, reverse course and land as soon as possible, unless you have ice protection system on your plane. And like I said, we're going to talk about that next time. Freezing rain is caused because precipitation that starts as snow, you see we've got a cross section of the boundary of a warm front. So on the warm side of the frontal boundary, that's going to be rain. But the minute it falls through the cold side of the boundary, it's freezing, and it's going to freeze on contact with whatever it hits. And that's the end of this beginning presentation. There are the references. Anything else you'd like to talk about?
Well, here's the thing. One of the things that I wanted to point out and get your opinion on this, of course, I've been on the field for over 50 years, near 60 years, and pilots sometimes, they refer to the weather guys as being wrong 70% of the time. and you probably heard this many, many times.
Sure.
And you probably have heard this too. But here's the thing. I think that's false, because when the weather guy gives you the forecast, most likely the weather guy is right, because he's telling you what he or she is seeing right now. Mm-hmm. But the weather is unpredictable.
That's right.
And the weather is the one that makes the weather guy look bad, because and pilots really need to understand that, because sometimes pilots don't pay too much attention to this forecast because they think that the weather guy is wrong. And I think they need to look at that. So I want your opinion on that area.
Good points. First off, a weather forecast is an educated guess, and it's got to be continuously updated. One of the examples I give when I'm teaching meteorology in the Midwest, a farmer can wake up in Nebraska, clear sky, not a cloud in the sky. By 10 or 11 o'clock, the clouds can start forming. By 12 to 2 o'clock, we can have supercell thunderstorms. By 4 o'clock, we can have 10 or 100 tornadoes. We can kill 100 to 1,000 people. And by 8 o'clock at night, the skies are clear. That's the nature of the changing, because the sun goes up and the sun goes down. And the sun is the primary heat source for what drives our weather system. So when we're doing planning, we always say, we want to know what the weather's going to be when we take off. We want to know what the weather's going to be en route. Let's say we're taking off from Orlando and going to Chicago. And then we want to know what the weather is predicted to be in Chicago when we get to Chicago. But we need to be updating our information the whole way, especially if there's frontal weather in the, in the area.
Here's the thing, and this is, I'm producing some videos now, and one of the things that I'm going to talk about in one of the videos is this. I think, and this is my personal opinion, that the term go or no go does more harm to pilots than if we change that. And I have an idea for that. Because here's what happened. Our mind is a goal-seeking mechanism, correct?
Sure.
Of course. So when the pilot says, I'm going, based on the weather, and then en route the weather changes, but the goal was to go.
Right.
It's like when you go to a party, right? You go to a party, there's a crash, what do? You look for it, and then you detour, and because your goal is to go to the party. Instead of saying go or no go, I think that it should be changed, which, by the way, there's 4 things that a pilot needs to be able to do in order to wear the 4 stripes, okay, to be a captain. And the first thing the pilot should say is, shall I depart? Mm-hmm. Okay, that means that I'm just going to depart. Then as I go, my decision was made only to depart, not to go to the destination. So now I'm flying and the thing starts to look bad, like the weather guy was wrong. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And now the question is, shall I continue? And if the weather looks better, then I go. If the weather doesn't look better, then I turn back. But the decision to go to the destination hasn't been made yet. So this is not going to tell us, listen, don't worry about it. It's going to get better. Remember, they're wrong 70% of the time. So this is going to change. And this is just my personal opinion, and I think that it does make a little bit of sense.
And what goes right with that are all the accident investigation reports where a VFR pilot flies into instrument meteorological conditions and they don't react quick enough. They start saying, well, I can just get under this, get some warm air, and they don't realize, they haven't done their pre-planning enough, that there's a mountain range coming or the elevation is going up. If you go from Florida to Chicago, I forgot what the field elevation is in Chicago, but it's not sea level like it is in Florida. So you've got 2 things working against you. You got the clouds are coming down and the ground's coming up. And we're going to touch this more in the next segment. But one of your options is to turn around or land. Talk to air traffic control and say, hey, where's the closest airport? I'm icing up. I don't have an icing protection system. Can you vector me to some place so I can get on the ground ASAP? And we're going to emphasize in the next presentation, we don't want you to stall that aircraft. We want you to make a controlled descent. Even as in the case of John and Martha King, which they put in all their presentations, how they ran into this situation, and they were lucky. They came down. It just started to be dusk. They saw lights in the highway, and he put it down in a snowfield and lived.
Exactly.
Miraculously, he lived. It could have ended completely differently, and it has ended differently, unfortunately, for a lot of other pilots.
It's a thing. I think that the thing begins with regulations, and I know when you had there Part 121, 639, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
But you know, human beings, whether you're a pilot or a mechanic, when it comes to regulation, instead of looking at the spirit of the regulation, what I call the spirit of the regulation, we try to find the angle that will allow me to do some things that are not necessarily compliant with the regulation, and we kind of fool ourselves into this kind of thing. And when the icing forecast is there, it must be believed. I think why I say that, because I was one of those. Okay, and I took off on a 150, and there was forecast icing, but hey, the weather guys they're not going to be right, you know. So I took off, and I was about maybe 10 miles from the airport, and the windshield started to get foggy, and it didn't look good. And I immediately turned back. Well, luckily, I was able to land during the slip because I couldn't see in the front, so I had to land looking out the side window. So whenever you're faced with a regulation, and this is kind of an advice, so to speak, it's don't look at the angle of the regulation, look at the spirit. Why did they write that? And that's the important thing. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and that's another segue into a problem, not so much for general aviation, but corporate pilots and airline pilots that get stuck on a hold on the runway or in the taxiway. They've already been de-iced. As far as they know, they're good to go. And all of a sudden, during that period, they start picking up snow, they start picking up ice. They're in a hurry to go. They're already an hour behind schedule. They take off, and that's the last we see them.
Okay. You had a slide there that it was really good, and I would like to dig a little bit deep in there, because most pilots don't understand why at this level I can pick up ice, and at this level, which is colder, it's going to be better for me than being here. So if you would like to expand on that, that would be great.
I just pulled it up again. If we can go to that slide. There
exactly. That's the.
And by the way, that's out of the COMET program. If you want to improve your weather knowledge, that's a program anybody can look at online through the National Weather Service. And you can see at the lower level, now this, of course, this wouldn't be this week, or it's where with the wind chill it's 40 below in North Dakota. But during the normal times, at low altitude, you shouldn't have any issues with icing. Keeping an eye on your outside air temperature indicator. It's only when you get near the freezing level that you're going to have trouble. But most small aircraft are flying in that area between 0 degrees and negative 15 degrees. So you've got to start looking for it and be ready to turn around if you have a problem.
Exactly. Another thing that a lot of pilots don't understand is that once you start picking up ice, there are a slew of things that are going to start conspiring against you reaching the destination.
Right.
And one of them is drag.
Yep.
And once you have drag, now you're going to need more power. And what happens when you need more power? You're going to use more fuel. Yep. So would you like to expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, could you go? There we go. This is a cartoon, but it really hits home. As Diego was saying, the minute you start to lose power, either because of carb icing that we're going to talk about next, or ice on the propeller, you're going to start slowing down, and you're going to add power. You're going to want to add power. If you get icing on the wings, you're going to have decreased lift. You're going to have to add more power to maintain altitude, and all this is slowing you down. And if you don't do anything, you're going to get in a situation where your only option is to head for the ground at 10,000 feet per minute. So the minute we see ice, we got to do something about it. We either got to call air traffic control and see if we can get another altitude. Are there any PIREPs of people reporting not ice as well as ice? And that's another thing pilots can do. Anytime they do encounter ice, they should call ATC and make a PIREP. And anytime they don't encounter ice when they were inspecting ice, call ATC and make a PIREP. Say, hey, I'm at 8,000 feet and there's no ice here and there was supposed to be. Just want you to know.
Exactly. Here's the thing. I was telling you before that there are four things that a pilot has to be able to do to wear those 4 bars. And the first thing, of course, is to solo. Once you solo, you can get 1 bar. Because now you're a pilot. You already took off by yourself, went around, and landed, right? So you're a pilot. And I guess we've been called students for too long. And then you continue being a student pilot. And it shouldn't be. It should be a pilot in training after you solo. Because now you're a pilot, you already piloted an airplane. So that's the first bar that you should have there. The other bar that you should have is being able to say, no, I'm not going.
Yep.
That's the second bar. And the third bar is making a 180. Being able, without hesitation, to see a situation and say, I'm going back. Be able to do that.
And as all the certified flight instructors are watching this, it's something they ought to do with their student when they're in the plane. And they ought to just tap them on the shoulder and say, we're icing, put it on the ground as fast as you can.
Exactly. And the fourth thing is be able, without hesitation, to do a go around.
Right.
Those are the 4 things, in my opinion, that make a pilot put 4 bars up here. It doesn't matter that you're flying a 150 or a 747, because once you're by yourself in the airplane, 91.3 doesn't differentiate between a student pilot solo and a 747 captain. The same rules that apply here apply here. So it's good to know from the very beginning that decision making is the key to the whole thing. And so is in weather. See what happens? When you're having a good time?
That's it.
Time flies, man. Listen, just stay put, because we're just going to take a little break and we're going to come back. If you think this was interesting, wait until we get back. So I want to see you to stay there. We're coming right back.